No, in fact, I had the electrician when I remodeled the bedroom, so I've got a switch next to the bed, and I just put the fountain on and off with the light switches, and then it's tied to that. So if I want to take a nap in the afternoon, I can just flip on the fountain and listen to my little fountain, which I like because it had this little salmon on the top, so those pitiful little boys piddling into the water, and all those awful, things. So
I like that. That's neat.
Okay.
Okay.
Anytime.
Oh, okay. I'll stand up here.
Okay, Susie, so we'll just sort of start in, and maybe the first question, let's talk about, for you to talk about the inception of, when we talk about your garden, let's talk about maybe as a drought-tolerant garden, I'm just holding it, just talk about, maybe we can focus on the strip, the inception of it, why you decided to do it, how you approached it. You can mention the length of time, and you can bring as much or as little in as you want, and if you don't bring in stuff, I can get to it later. So if you want to just start talking about it, and then just go stream of consciousness and let it roll.
okay.
Okay? Yeah. Float planes.
Well, what I'll do is I'll just start talking about when I came here, 15 years ago, and then I'll just kind of roll along with, my evolution into the, water-wise kind of plants.
I think that's a real nice way to start.
Yeah. And then that way you can cut out all the beginning part, but at least I have some continuity to my thoughts as
Sounds good.
a.
Sounds good. Okay, why don't you just go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Let's see. Just go ahead and start free associating with my thoughts? Okay. I moved up here about 15 years ago from the Bay Area, and at that time was quite involved in gardening there, and came up here but found the gardening very different in that the kind of plant material, the environment, the climate was very different, and the plants that I had loved so much from my home seemed to not make it here. They didn't live. I would bring them up and found out that what they were doing is they were actually rotting in the ground because there was too much water during some of the months, and then the rest of the summer, which is actually sort of a drought up here with about 5 inches of rain during the summer.
Yeah, as long as we're pausing on this one, did you know you only have one airing on?
No.
Can
Did
you take it off of the phone?
Either that or I lost it. No, I can just take it off. No, I'll just have to, I hope that's what I did. My guess.
That's what I usually do.
Yeah, no, it would have probably been this one. I don't know. So
I'm just noticing it.
no, I'm glad that you
Might have
mentioned
been
it.
noticeable, but I thought I'd wait till it was great.
Yeah.
I liked the way you were talking about it. I'm sorry the plane happened.
Decided to come in.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep coming in. We might just have to talk around. Okay.
Okay, unless a direct pass over the house. Anyway, so that, with the 5 inches of rain, the Mediterranean plants that I was so fond of did fine, but then I'd lose them every winter, and it wasn't because it was too cold here, it was just too wet. So actually employed a landscape designer to help me figure out how I could have these drought-tolerant plants that I was so fond of without, killing them because of the rain, and found out that if we amended the soil properly, if we gave them proper drainage, then in fact these plants did quite well up here, and actually seeded and came back each year. The annuals did, particularly the California poppies, loved it. And so having sort of gotten a formula down, started to bring more plants, up here. And I live on the water and do have a permit to pump as much water as I want on the garden, and yet felt that that was not the thing that was proper to do in a community that was being restricted on their water use, as well as that the plants that I truly enjoyed best were not the evergreens of the Northwest, although I think they're beautiful, but were the the warmer plants, the colors of the Mediterranean plants, the grays, the soft pastels. And so began to take more and more of my garden and make it into more of a water-wise garden. I also found that I would like to do some traveling during the summer, and that I was always having friends come over and have to water so that I wouldn't lose these plants on a long weekend someplace. And have found that at this time, these plants do well. They can go, a week or more in hot, hot weather. Sometimes 2 if we, have our, intermittent summer rains. And that the maintenance of them, it was easier. They weren't growing quite as rapidly as the other plants, didn't need pruning back as much, and that just the foliage texture alone would make the garden in many instances. And
We have you moved closer to me. Okay. She's looking a little closer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stand behind you.
And it was sort of fun that I found one of the years I actually put a lot of fertilizer, because I thought, well, that's what you need to get lush plants, and ended up killing many of my lavenders and artemisias and my sages, because the ground was much too rich for them. They really didn't want the fertilizer. They didn't want all that nitrogen. They didn't want all that water. And so this last year I have not done any fertilizing, and find that they are, you know, perfectly healthy. That the amount of flowers I'm getting off of them, you know, is what one would expect. That they aren't looking deprived because they don't have the fertilizer that they had. They don't have the water, and they're thriving and doing fine. In fact, when friends come over to the garden, they like it on a hot day to get into more of the woodland part. But after they've cooled off, they you know, enjoy the flowers, want to know what all the plants are. And it has never come up that, you know, are these, quote, drought-tolerant plants? Are these water-wise plants? They just enjoy them. And I find that many of the plants in the border I use for cut flower arrangements, which I like, and maybe because they're not used to a great deal of water, that just put in a vase, they don't need to suck up a lot of water, and they last a great deal of time. And as they start to age, they still are really pretty. The flower heads on the grasses, the flower heads on the lavender, the euphorbias, that there's a lot of plant material that the, you know, the seed heads themselves, you know, just left, you know, on the plant is really pretty.
Oh, wind again. Oh, do I pick this? These mics are just driving me. If you want me to, I don't have. She might have to angle a little bit so that I think it's coming from back.
Want me to,
Sort of angle toward you.
or,
Now, of course, now it stops. Might be that just. This is for being such a peaceful place, this is the noisiest.
and isn't it funny? It takes,
Saws and the yelling.
it's funny just that something like this makes you aware of it, that otherwise, you know,
You wouldn't think about it.
you wouldn't
It's
think
very
about it.
peaceful. Maybe we could, do you want to go back to talk about, if you like to leave them in place, the big foliage textures year round? Well, maybe we can talk about that a little bit more, your year round, how
Okay.
year round it is, that it isn't just a one season garden.
Okay.
You want to,
Wait.
I don't want to.
So this guy drones over the top here.
Well, that one's further away. These look very natural. Which I think is great.
Yes, honey. I'm down here in the path, and the flowers down that border moving around a lot. So it is down there,
I think it's from the water.
coming off the lake.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to start in on
Yeah.
the seed heads?
I guess one of the added beauties of the drought-tolerant plants is that the seed heads that they produce are great later in the year, cut and used in flower arrangements or wreaths in the holidays, or just left on the plants. They turn colors and are quite attractive just left that way. The wind in the evening on the big ornamental grasses, you know, sort of blow things back and forth so that there's actually movement to the garden. I've just found them to be really a satisfying sort of plant to have. That the plants in the garden that require a lot of water dramatically show distress when they don't get it. The rhododendron leaves curl up. They just, you know, become, you know, actually sort of a depressing aspect to the garden, whereas the drought-tolerant plants just sort of keep looking like they're quite happy, being hot and dry and deprived of water.
Do you want to talk about butterflies? Butterflies, maybe that'd be a good thing to talk about. Talk about the garden, how old this is,
Okay.
how satisfying it is year round,
Okay.
and attracting wildlife, bees, birds, butterflies, whatever feels
Okay.
satisfying to you.
Okay. In the original inception of the garden, many of the plants that went in, I guess people would consider almost herbs, and yet the scents the colors, the texture of these different herbs, the sages, the salvias, the rosemarys, the lavenders, produced flowers that the bees seem to love, and not the yellow jacket sort of bee, but the honey bee. And I actually can walk into the flowers, and they're so intent on gathering their honeys from the different herbs that they've never stung me. I like the shrub, the butterfly bush, the buddleia, and that brings all kinds of butterflies also to the garden. I have to plant 2 of my nepitas, which is catnip, and one the cat sleeps in and crushes, and the other one he leaves for me. So we have an active border of cats and butterflies and bees. And I find that for whatever reasons, and I haven't really looked into it, but that the insects, the kind that people don't like, the kind that they feel that they have to spray or poison, don't like the gray Mediterranean foliage. That I don't have the trouble, though, when I plant the annuals. They seem much more, the insects, attracted, the sucking, biting, chewing ones that everybody finds so distasteful in their garden, seem to leave the, water-wise plants alone. They don't seem to find them to be very enjoyable. And so I literally need no pesticides to keep, this section of the garden looking good. As I think I mentioned, I use no fertilizer because it actually makes it too leggy and the plant weak. And I don't use very much water, and so to me that's a real plus. The textures of the different plants start in early spring. There's a lot of bulbs that don't like water. Most of the bulbs do not like water, in fact, and will rot. And so starting in January and February, there's the crocus and the small species tulips that fill the border. And many of the South African bulbs like it in the border. And then as the spring starts to roll, more and more of the foliage comes up, much of it being variegated. And so even before there's any flowers, there's color and texture. And then that kind of covers over the bulbs, which have now become quiet. And then a few roses in the border that are the floribundas that don't take a great deal of water, but seem to go on and are sort of perpetual bloomers. And they get hand watered because they take a little bit extra than the other plants do. I just find that all year round something is going on in the border. There is a certain quiet time during the winter when it gets cleaned up, and often I'll just let all of the plants kind of fall on each other, and the seed heads from the different irises stay, and they add something of interest just kind of structurally in the garden. There are a few evergreens. The California lilac, or the ceanothus, stays green all year, and again, because of the good drainage, it doesn't rot, and because of the sun, it does seem to get that little bit of extra heat, or that little microclimate that's necessary for some of these plants that came from a warmer area and are now acclimating to the northwest.
Can you tell us how much maintenance, how much time you spend maintaining?
Okay. The border does not take, it can take as much maintenance or as little as I want to give it. If I want to leave the seed heads on, if I want to let things kind of roll on top of each other, then I don't have to do much maintenance. If I want to make it a little bit more ordered, if I want to give each plant more of its own space, I have to spend more time on it. But it, even left to just sort of run into each other, works also. And I think that's more the personality, that sort of subjective of the gardener. Some gardeners, like it a much more ordered look, and some are quite comfortable with just sort of a wild, sort of almost a cottage garden feeling to the plant material.
Maybe if we can talk a little bit more about. Okay, I can ask you the question how you feel that gardening is changing in the Northwest today.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that angle. And then another thing is, as a gardener, someone who loves gardening for its own sake, I want you to talk about plant material. You mentioned bringing out plants from California, and I think it'd be appropriate to talk about the increase in the
availability.
Yeah,
low.
no, it was a thought too, because that is true, that I can go to the nurseries now and find a lot more of these plants that I used to have to feel like I was shipping them in are now right here that others are finding them.
Okay, let's start with, I mean, unless you have a
No,
preference.
no.
Let's go back to talking about the reasoning again. The fact that you have water available, but your reason for doing low water landscaping is partly, sort of the right thing to do. Want to just start in talking about that?
Okay.
How you feel about the whole thing?
Okay. Part of the reason for growing the kind of water-wise plants that I do is because they remind me of home, because I grew up with them, because they bring fond memories. And although I am fortunate enough to have one of the original permits to pump water from the lake, I don't feel, with a growing population and the need for everybody, that it is, a responsible thing to grow large gardens that demand a lot of water, that there are ways of having a wonderful garden that don't require, a great deal of water. And so I would almost rather, take my energies and not only not use a lot of water, but have the plants I wanted anyway. And I find that it's also where I used to have to bring plants in to the Northwest because everybody was growing plants that took a great deal of water, that now more and more of the nurseries are carrying wonderful selections of water-wise plants that there's whole sections. I mean, you can just walk in and see that they've even set them up in such a way. I'm very involved with several different garden groups, and at the Arboretum, which is one of the organizations I'm with, we have in fact done a drought-tolerant garden on the north end of our visitor center, which I don't think people are even aware that it has anything to do with being a water-wise garden. It's just a beautiful place, and we've got all kinds of vines to bring the butterflies, and we've got bushes to bring scent, and we've got hummingbirds coming in there. And it's a place where the staff goes out and has their lunch, and visitors to the Arboretum, come and look at all of the wonderful kind of little plants that can be stuck in the pavers, and year-round is a wonderful, addition to the Arboretum. Many of the plant groups now are having garden tours, and more when I go, I see gardens where people are consciously, trying to do gardens that don't take a great deal of water, but have a great deal of interest. And so plants that normally weren't used, the ornamental grasses, are becoming very popular for a number of reasons. They come in different colors, they have wonderful seed heads on them, they look good from the time they start till late fall when the rains finally take them down. The majority of these will come back again in the spring. These plants are, I think, just more and more becoming, people are becoming aware of them. They're being introduced to them, and it's sort of fun to join the different garden groups because you start to see what people are doing with the plants. I was with a study group a year or so ago where we made a list of, I think we're up to about 1,800 plants that members had compiled that do well, without a great deal of water to incorporate into the garden. And then actually Sunset Magazine was very aware that we needed to perhaps look at a different way of doing gardening in the Northwest beside using a great deal of water. And so they came out to my garden and liked what they saw, that in fact you can do a garden